Pete Yost here for the Unbuilt It podcast. I want to give a quick word about our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods, their booth at the International Builder Show 2024 coming up in Vegas, and our podcast. Well, first of all, I've been going to International Builders Show for over 30 years. I love to go there because when I want to get good technical information and make, most importantly, the personal contacts with the technical people, I can do that at the International Builders Show. They've got good technical representation for their products and systems. We're going to be the podcast at the booth for Huber C3320 on Wednesday and Thursday of the show. But I want to specifically feature on Wednesday, February 28th, we're going to be talking a bit about the ZIPS system R-sheathing and playing that incredibly popular building science trivia where I get to beat the pants off of both Steve and Jake. Plus, if you stop by the booth, you might run into some friends from the podcast. If you'll be in Vegas, come by and say hello at the Huber booth C3320. If you can't make it to Vegas, follow along on what's happening on Instagram at Huber Wood. You can also follow along with Instagram, of course, with the three of us. It's Stephen Basic Architect, it's Jake.Bruton, and Building Right Peter. And I'll just say that there's nothing instantaneous about my experience with my Instagram account. But for everything related to Huber Woods at IBS 2024, check out their website, huberwood.com/Huber-IBS, and we're looking forward to seeing you at the show. Now on to the podcast.
Howdy, y'all. Live from Texas. What do you got against Texas now?
It wasn't against Texas.
No,
it was you
I
screaming.
Say howdy, and
it was you screaming.
Frown.
It was you screaming. It wasn't about
Sorry.
Texas.
For all you cowboy boot, cowboy hat wearing friends of mine, I apologize for Jake's bad attitude he has with Texas and cowboys. So I apologize.
He does love the military, though.
No, he doesn't. It's right up there with cowboys and Texas. But that's all right. Hey, he's...
Welcome to the podcast, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. That's the weirdest start.
Yeah, well, until I was rudely interrupted by seat 3. I'm not even going to give you a name. I just have seat 3 with me today and seat 2 with me today.
Well, thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon from seat 3.
There you go. Seat 3PO.
Wow.
That's a stretch.
And we're not starting over.
And
we're
this
just
is how we do liquid lunches at the Unbuilt podcast.
So, man, those shots were good. No, I'm just teasing. I don't drink. So.
I haven't had peppermint schnapps since college.
Peppermint schnapps. All right. So today's podcast is a special because we've culled through literally hundreds of thousands of write-in questions.
Whoa.
And we found what we would think to be 2 of the very best. I thank you both for going through that and coming up with the questions. So the question I have is, which one of you wants to go first?
I think I have both of them, so I think it'll be me.
Okay. So the answer to that is Jake, or seat 1.
We just hope that we have answers that are up to the questions, apparently.
Yeah, and these are the listeners should know that these are blind. You two have not.
You know what's cool about this, Mike?
Yet.
I just had a Rambo moment thought. Remember when he was talking on the mic and he just wants to grip the mic and before he smashes the guy? Forget it. Yeah, obviously you haven't seen Rambo.
Yeah,
That's right.
Not since it came out.
You want to know something funny? Seriously, you're gonna find this really interesting.
We're gonna know either way.
Not only did I see the movie, I read the book.
Really?
I did.
You read the book Rambo. Man, there's so many layers to this. I don't even know.
Just for frame of reference.
I did.
How many other books have you read that were also movies? Is that the only one?
No, because I think they did make a movie on the Pillars of the Earth. I read that too. I have a quite extraordinary spectrum. I don't have a lot that fills in the gaps. But
there are a lot of gaps.
When you're looking at the outliers, there's a lot of gaps.
And when we talk about the spectrum, you are extraordinary.
I am.
So it's Pillars of the World.
Pillars of the Earth.
Pillars of the Earth.
It's 900. Have you ever seen the book?
No.
The book's 3 inches. I couldn't believe I even read it, but I did. It was actually pretty cool.
That, Rambo.
And
I'm assuming Babe, Pig in the City.
No, I haven't. I read Animal Farm.
There you go.
I did read Animal Farm in 1984.
big George Orwell fan, or is that a
that was
result?
Somewhat required reading?
That's because of the era in which you went to high school.
Yeah.
We are moving towards the questions eventually here.
No, we are.
This is interesting to me. Why don't you quit stepping all over the content, Pete?
I'm almost done with this one book called
One.
Yeah, I'm almost. So you want to hear? It's in my book. It's in my briefcase.
You still haven't finished it?
I haven't finished it yet.
Steve recommended it to me probably before COVID.
Like, yeah, probably 2 or 3
And
weeks
I've been
ago.
recommending it to people because it is a good book.
And
he hasn't finished it.
You know, when he finishes that one, he's going to go on to the book called Two.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, question number 1 for today. My wife and I are in the pre-construction phase of our new home. As a mechanical engineer,
wedding planning question almost.
As a mechanical engineer, I've been very turned off by the production quality of quality construction here in the Pacific Northwest, which has driven me to learn about modern building science and ultimately led me to your content. Well, thank you. The design of our house is very Scandinavian with no overhangs, except for gable ends. The only person in the world that would say, I'm an engineer, I love quality construction, I want no overhangs. I am trying to retain this architecture.
And call building science modern building science. Like somehow.
Thanks for writing in your question, Andrew, while we crap on it.
Yeah, somehow rain today is different than rain 10,000 years ago.
I'm gonna summarize a little bit of this. I just watched Joe Lstiburek talk about open joint cladding and how it can perform better than closed joint systems, assuming lap siding applies here. My question is, why isn't open joint cladding more prevalent if it does a better job for performance? I see fiber cement lap siding as kind of I can't talk all of a sudden, kind of the standard, even in high performance houses covered by you guys on the Build Show Network. Am I missing something? So it's kind of a building science, but it's also kind of a design aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even how claddings change over time.
Or tastes.
But I think if we back the truck up even further, that a lot of what we do in building is clearly, whether it's right or wrong, it's a perceived perspective, right? People see open joint cladding and, oh my God, you're letting the water in. No, I'm actually letting the water out, right? I have free draining and free drying at a maximum potential here. But people don't see that because they really haven't chosen to understand what's really going on. You know, this gets back to my basic premise, and I think we should do a podcast on this in the near future. But basically, we always try and provide solutions without really understanding the problem. Like, we're really quick to say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, when you don't really understand, like, why should we do that, right? So the question here is, and well, I think he phrased it as like, why don't I see more of that? And it's the why that is the problem, because the why becomes the basis for people's perspective, and that's where it gets shut out. Who's the guy that I told you about? I'm really stretching it here, but the guy that did the TED Talk, didn't I tell you about that? He said it was about decision. There was a TED Talk about decision-making process, and you could talk about a whole bunch of things, but if you can understand the why, like, you can actually make that decision and defend that decision very easily and make that decision very, very easily. When you don't really understand the why, I have to watch the TED Talk again, but it was really good. But the why, understanding the why that works would help generate probably more of it, and an understanding which would change the perspective on it.
So let's talk about actual assembly. Let's start with, what does a wall look like? How do we get to what we would call an open joint cladding? Let's work towards a definition, right?
Ooh.
So recently in a podcast, we talked about how cladding is not guaranteed to be waterproof. It's not.
Yeah, you know what? I almost want to call it screening.
Yeah,
not cladding. Like, if you change that term, I know Pete's frowning on it, so I can see it cooking, right?
Either that or he has to use the restroom. One or the other.
One or the other. So, but if you call it screening, then your perspective is water will get behind it, right? If you call it cladding, like, hey, that's ironclad, right? There's a certain perspective that comes with that term that suggests water's not getting beyond it. So I think can I make a point to say from this moment on in the building industry, we will no longer use the term cladding and only use the term screening.
He wants it to get confusing
we just went
quickly.
I'm changing the perspective on what we do. Right here, right now, this is 3:21, 17 seconds on September 19th. That's Central Time.
I'm not willing to make the switch from cladding to screening quite that easily, but
I think we work to educate the understanding of the word cladding to begin with. The building is clad in this. It's covered with this.
I don't agree. But you guys never agree with me. You always want to pick a fight with me.
Fair. I'll have you know that we went to Olive Garden for lunch today, and it was your idea. So
it was not my idea. It was not my idea. It was Mr. I don't want to drive in the truck anymore. Can we just walk over there and go to lunch? So
just so we're clear, that impersonation is spot on the way Pete talks when he's not in public or on camera. That's exactly what he sounds like. Like his kids probably thought that was him saying it just now on the podcast. So if we have our WRB that is on the outside of our frame wall, and then if we're focusing on durable construction, we then have a rain screen or a drainage plane of some sort.
Yes.
And then we have our screening or our cladding or our brick, whatever we want to call it.
Yes.
No matter the term. An open joint version of that is exactly what the term says. The joints on it are open. The connections between the boards don't exist. There is a space between them, right? Examples of, yes, Steve's doing things with his hands. For those of you that are listening to the podcast, it's very informative and you're missing it.
It's sort of a Spock in motion type thing.
Yeah, it is. Live long and prosper.
Only 1.7% of the population can do that.
And Steve's part of that 1.7%, and that's why he knows that.
We just talked about how special he was at the very beginning of this podcast.
And now everybody in the room is doing the exact same thing to see if they can do it.
This is the unbuilt podcast version of Squirrel.
Yeah, it is. Sorry.
We're walking out into New York and going,
look at that.
Can I?
No, go ahead. We're in no hurry.
A few words from Pete.
I'm trying to think of when I saw my first open joint cladding, and that includes because the buildings I see are both
we're going to talk about our first
new
time.
to
was it the pyramids?
Old. I didn't see open joint claddings until actually probably 4 years ago.
Oh.
So how long?
No, that's not
true
because I've showed you open joint claddings earlier than that.
Well, I've
done them probably about 12, 14 years ago.
But when did they first show up on buildings? I can't find historical buildings that have open joint cladding.
And you do go back to the Renaissance.
You're obfuscating. You're not answering my question.
I think that's on purpose. I think he was doing that on purpose.
I don't know, because historically, are there any stone buildings that stacked weren't necessarily treated? So the joints would
dry stack.
Or dry stack?
No, dry stack is still one piece meeting another. It's not an intentional gap between the two.
Gotcha.
Fair enough.
Right? So I frankly think that both aesthetically and functionally, open joint cladding is really super cool.
Yeah.
But I can't think of, representative architecture from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, where there were open joint cladding. So I'm just curious, who's the first person to ever do an open joint cladding system?
I'm initially going to have to agree with you. I can't think of anything older than, say, 2015 that
I did one probably like 2006, 2007 that I can remember doing.
And did you do it because you had seen somebody else do it, or what drove you to try that open joint system?
Are you questioning his originality?
No, I'm curious.
But it was Joe probably talking about like doing that would be better and taking it to the next level, but never that I didn't see it before I did that. That's Philip's house. We did.
Oh, really?
The first time I did it. It was 1x4 cedar siding.
No
and
kidding.
had a 3/16 inch gap. But so here's a question. Now I want to go back because I'm still on my defense of cladding. Is if I build a wall out of zip, put furring strips, and then put a wood lap siding, is the zip more of a cladding than the wood lap siding?
So to me, the definition of
which one is more ironclad?
No,
I think you're obfuscating the word clad and cladding in that instance.
See, this is where they team up.
the cladding.
Listen, I'm in your court. I got you.
The cladding on a roof or a wall is what you put on last as the finishing of the wall system. So it could be stucco, brick, wood cladding, wood siding, lap.
I would argue
Mommy and Daddy are fighting, and I'm in between them.
I would argue that you're saying that, and I would agree. The industry's perspective is that is the cladding, because that is. When I break, I'm going to look up the word clad. If you have your phone, look it up. But I would love to understand what Webster, my friend, says cladding is.
Well, cladding's clothing for people.
But we're not talking about people.
Well, no, we are.
Did you know
we're talking about the word
about
cladding, right? So it's the outer finish material. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about buildings or people.
Cladding is the application of one material over another to provide a skin or layer.
Wow.
Also, it goes on to say in construction, and then the definition is pretty garbage after that.
Yeah. I almost have to read that because I don't believe you. I think
but I guess what I'm saying is you're inferring that we did walls a long time ago that had the same breakdown of layers and the same functions for those layers. And we're doing a lot more.
No, what I'm saying is that years ago, we did cladded walls, which were very thick masonry walls, and that the cladding was the face of the masonry. What I'm suggesting is we took that conceptually and pushed it back and then put something in front of it. That is necessarily no longer cladding, but now I can't even believe Webster.
How does a roof play out then? Are the shingles the cladding?
To me, screening implies that stuff gets through it.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. I think
that's the argument he's
There's
making.
my argument. If I take a wood lap siding and I spray a fire hose at it, does water make it to the backside?
Yeah, but screening is a bunch of holes. It's not the same.
But translates into, yes, you're right, but I'm still going to argue against it. That's what but is. But that's okay.
I find with clients, especially, it's easier to say yes and instead of but.
So that's just the tactic I should deploy with Steve?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give it a try.
Work.
Yeah. I seriously doubt it.
What tactic? I mean, I can see your point, but I guess my point is we call it cladding, and a lot of getting back to the original question here, which I think we're coming back around the moon on, is it's about perspective. Right? Why don't we see more of it? Why don't we use it? It's not because it's a great way to deal with it. It's in fact that we think we're letting water in. But people don't really understand the mechanisms of a leak and what does it actually mean and what we're doing there.
Maybe some of this comes from building boats because, we have weather lapped or lap straked boats that are built, and the idea is that they are the defense against the water, right? So then we transferred that lapping of boards to buildings, and we originally thought, well, they're going to keep all the water out. And I think that's part of the problem is that, no, of course they can't keep all the water out. So what is your strategy? In the olden days, the strategy was, well, just throw enough BTUs at that and it'll dry out, even if there isn't a free draining gap. So if we think of the cladding as not dealing with all the water, that opens up all kinds of possibilities, like open joint cladding systems.
We saw a really cool one when we were in Vancouver a couple of years ago.
Vancouver, Kentucky?
This is Canada.
Oh, okay.
There was a project up there that we went and visited. And they actually had a 2x2 cedar vertically oriented open joint screen that was
like fencing?
Yes.
Oh,
it was
wow.
like almost like a balustrade, but think of it as a very tight balustrade where the spacing was maybe a little more than a quarter of an inch. And they had it on these boards, but the boards were back cut, so it was on a French cleat system on the wall. So literally, like, they fully waterproofed the wall, and then they put this cleat on there, and then they just put these panels and hung them in front of the wall.
Oh.
So it was truly, yes, it was like a picket fence in front of
Kind of a screening.
it.
I can't believe I just said
Almost
that.
a screening. This is where you're supposed to be happy, Steve. You're not supposed to shake your head. You just stuck with it long enough for him to give up.
Pain. We just went. It just took me
20 minutes.
20 minutes to get Peter to agree with me.
You know,
Hey,
it's
isn't
like
that better
fishing.
than him
It's
not
like
agreeing?
it's like fly fishing with Steve. You just have to like, ooh, yeah, he got it.
He's there finally.
This is so painful.
But what's really painful is I'm not exactly sure what the original question was, and if we come anywhere close to answering.
I'm an eagle. I have to soar higher.
The biggest part of the question was like,
you are a higher soar.
Do you know why
That's
eagles
for
soar
sure.
higher? Do you know the only animal that challenges an eagle? It's a crow.
Ew.
Okay. Do you know how crows challenge an eagle? They land on the back and they peck at its neck.
They go for a ride.
So how does the eagle get rid of him? He flies high enough where the crow doesn't fly. And the crow will leave and fly away because they're flying too high for the crow. It can't breathe or whatever
What are the
happens.
chances
like
that
Wild
this is
Kingdom.
a real story that
It is. I'm telling you.
researched or
I'm pretty sure there's a chapter
It
in
is.
Rambo.
No,
all
I
about
watched
eagles
Animal
and
Kingdom.
crows.
Animal Kingdom.
that would be
Gosh,
great if that
we
were-
got an eagle here, and it's flying high. It's got a crow on the back of its neck.
If you're getting your Animal Channel Network programs from a guy who wears a Patriots jersey, you might rethink the level of. Go ahead, say it. Jake hates the Patriots too.
So, Jake,
Jake just hates the NFL.
just refresh our memory, or my memory.
All he really wanted to know is how come we don't see it. I think we did a good job. Like, people are scared and they don't understand what's serving what purpose. That's why you don't see it. Aesthetically, it's not for everybody as well because it's a non-traditional look, as we covered.
Yeah.
Like, we don't see it traditionally. I've only had it come up really once where we actually executed it. And we did it in 2016, maybe. I was by the house the other day. It's cedar. And I was with one of the guys that used to work with me at the time. We drove by because we were having lunch. And he said, it doesn't look like it's doing that well. And I said, no, it's discoloring. And it's because they insisted on a clear, and the clear is discoloring. The wood is
This has nothing to
fine.
do with the joints.
It's not. It dries exceptionally well, probably. It's just that they haven't maintained it, and it's a big south exposed wall.
And we just did one on a project. I mean, we have a project literally right now that we're wrapping up that has a vertically oriented open joint rain screen.
And is it something you introduced to the client, or they asked
So
about it?
here's the interesting part. The client is probably, maybe aside from Coda, one of the smartest people I've ever met. And
Coda
How come you
Ueno, who
don't
is
lump me into the same?
building scientist for Building Science Corporation.
do you want to,
I understand why you don't lump me in. Sorry.
you know how like when they show that commercial of like people joining hands from New York to California,
Mhm.
if New York was the smartest, you're probably somewhere west of Las Vegas.
Okay. I thought you were going to say
And that-
waiting in the Pacific.
You're wading in the water. They're calling you in. So I did give you the benefit
My
of a little
pants are
doubt.
rolled up, but my socks are still
There
on.
you go. But he's a really intelligent engineering type. What this guy does for a job is just way cool. And when I introduced it to him, he says, "I love it." He goes, "It makes total sense." And it's like when he understood it, he probably just never put the puzzle pieces together in that format.
So to him, he liked the way it looked and the way it worked.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
He liked the metaphor that I proposed. He liked the physical aesthetic of it, but he loved the building science behind it. And it's one of those things that the thing that I find the most ironic about this question is it's probably one of the best wall systems you can put on a building, right? That would cause no problem. But if I show it to people, you're letting water in, bugs are going to get in. Oh my God, you're going to have bees and wasps. Thing's been up for 6 months. We haven't had a bug
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go in there. And they're free to go.
You're answering the question still. Like, people are confused by it.
People are confused.
Well, I usually do the resources for each of our Q&As or our sessions, and I'm going to look to see if there's any way that we can track down when was the first open joint cladding system.
I bet you, a quick email to Joe would probably get us in the right time frame.
Cool. He still answers your guys' emails?
And when you say Joe, you mean Joe Lstiburek, who is one of the principals at Building Science Corporation and a mentor for both Steve and me and Jake.
Mentor for the industry.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so rather than go on to a second question, I'm going to pose an open joint rain screen question to you.
Cool.
I'm assuming you're going to have an answer, Steve, because it's a house that you designed.
Ooh.
We have one in construction right now that has 3 different faces of the building that have a hardy fiber cement panel, 4-foot by 8-foot panels that are on a rain screen, but do not have any of the hardy trim around them, and do not have any of the, what is the other manufacturer that makes the trim?
Tamlin?
Tamlin. Doesn't have any of the Tamlin trims.
It's like a little H or C profile that you put in there and it receives the panel on both sides.
And it provides a space, but the space is aluminum.
Yeah.
It's just panels. The panels are gapped with about a half an inch between them.
Mm-hmm.
We have zip sheathing, zip R, and tape. And then we also have a drainage plane and or rain screen, draining and drying, and then the panel. The question in our office was, do we have to paint those batten strips? Do we have to paint the zip sheathing? You're going to be able to see in between those pieces. What do we do? And I'll tell you what our solution is after you.
You treated these are 4x8 sheets of hardy board, and at the joints you put on a furring strip first to be the closure, so it's like a reverse board and batten.
There isn't.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I guess, but there isn't a batten strip that bridges 2 panels.
Yeah, the battens are only vertical; they're not horizontal.
Gotcha. All right.
So it's basically an open joint panelization cladding. Panel
so
cladding.
I guess one of the questions. So you have intentional visible gaps at the top and bottom of each 4x8 panel.
And just for the record, this isn't.
cladding.
I showed them pictures. I've done this before.
Yeah.
On another project that we
Why
did with
couldn't you do it
Shoreline.
on all 4 edges and it would look like a commercial wall system?
It is, but the project manager, the first thing out of his mouth was, "But the zip is green, and you're going to be able to see it."
Well, but Steve's got plenty of techniques to deal with shadowing.
Yeah, we've put paper. We've done just like a black asphalt paper. But the one that when we did on the board vertical joint, Benjamin Obdike makes a UV resistant paper now.
They do. Yep.
And
Invisavrap.
Yep.
And it's specifically for open joint cladding.
For open joint claddings and for that reason. And they have a compatible batten strip, which is a UV batten strip.
Oh, that's right.
That's black as well. So
that's black as well. But if you want to go to the wood furring, I've done building paper, and then we had the builder take the 3-foot roll, cut it up on a chop saw to
just to be
like
shadow
4
strips,
and then just put a strip over the wood furring and hammer tacked it down and then put the panels over it.
Yeah, because if you gap everything, then you can't have wood to wood contact, and that's where the problems always set in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can do open joint horizontal cladding, why not panels? Why not? So this is interesting. I didn't think this was going to be about vertical open joint or panel open joint. I thought it was just about clapboard horizontal clapboards. And yet the principle's the same for all 3.
Yeah. And I mean, that makes my point of like the whole idea of perspective. If you understand what's happening, the mechanisms of leakage and drying and draining and all of that, you understand the type of cladding in that, it really doesn't matter. It's the space behind it and the outlet at the bottom and the outlet at the top that are the 3 primary requirements.
So the other thing is that,
success.
Steve, you might have a perspective on this because it's an aesthetic question, but we like to see non-planar assemblies. They're more interesting if they have changes in the depth.
Yeah. And I call it coastlining. I actually have a term for it.
Oh, cool.
Right. So if you think about the cladding coastlining.
Yeah. But if you have lines instead of just joints, the eye is attracted to those, not distracted by those, I think.
I'm going to get all artistic on you, right?
I wonder why you wore that shirt today, but now I understand why.
Yeah. This is
kind of artsy.
This is
I thought
who's
it was laundry.
It's a knockoff from who's the guy that did the Campbell soup thing?
Andy Warhol.
Andy Warhol. It's a Warhol. Just so you're wondering. Now you lost. Okay. No. So
he didn't lose it. You lost yourself.
No. So the whole like strips, right?
Yeah.
When I was talking to the client, we're standing out in his driveway, and this isn't a lie, right? And we were talking about the cladding system with him and the pros and cons of all kinds of things. And the tree is a heavily wooded site. Okay.
The tree.
The site is heavily wooded. Jesus,
okay,
you got me all screwed up now.
Can't see the site.
I knew it was my
I can't
fault.
see the forest from the trees.
You can't see the site from the trees.
Right? So the site is heavily wooded.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the client and said, what if we just do that?
Mm.
And he said, do what? And I said, see how when you look through the forest, there's a bunch of vertical lines. I said, what if we took that and created a cladding system that was the inverse? So everywhere there's a tree, we put a joint, right? So the solution
He
was
is full of baloney, isn't he?
no. This is
the architect school.
That's the thing. He has a deep aesthetic side. He just hides it all the time, most of the time.
So the vertical is not only is it a vertically oriented open joint system, it's a multi-width board cladding. So we have 2x3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, and 8s.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look across there, it's kind of a bunch of organized, chaotic vertical joints that are in these boards. And it kind of morphed from the view into the forest.
So you didn't coastline, you forested.
We forested.
You and I are just spinning out new terms like screening and foresting.
I mean, this guy here, he sends in one email, we come up with 5 new terms.
Okay. Before we wrap,
Is this where I say how goodbye y'all yet? Or no?
Wait a minute, you can't have gaps in the wrap. That's the one, no open joint wraps.
I've been hoping that you were going to say this, and you've yet to say it, Steve. One of the things that you said, and I probably heard you say this, I don't know, years ago. We'll say years ago. When we're talking about rain screening and cladding and draining and drying, the thing that you said that made it all click for me was it's a rate question. And I've heard you say it a bunch to other people since then, and it makes perfect sense. And it's a question of rate. Can it dry more than it wets? Does it have more drying time than it has wetting time? And if so, then it's going to be dry and we'll be fine. And I think that that's the thing that like makes open joint cladding click for me, that makes the rain screen click for me, that it's a rate question. As long as we know that it can dry more than it's going to wet, then we're fine.
You know, it's interesting. I've been wanting to do this, and this is a good put your wingnut hat on. I want to build a vertically open joint rain screen system, right? 3/16" joint. And then on the back side of it, fur off a piece of plexiglass, hit it with a hose at somewhat of an angle. Because if you hit it straight on, you're going to blow into the holes. But I think if you shot it from, say, a 45-degree angle and filmed it from the back side of the plexiglass, it would be real interesting to see how little water goes in. Because my guess is this is going to, when it hits the board, it's going to find the edge and want to fall, right? There's nothing that's pushing it in that joint. And I think we would be absolutely astonished at how little water actually gets behind that system.
Okay. If you would like to run that test and send in the video,
we should do that.
Email Steve for testing parameters. Or
we can
Pete.
set that up. I'll fly out there and we'll do the test.
Okay.
You set up
very
the system.
simple. We
went from arguing about cladding and screening to Steve talking about wingnut. That's a lot.
Well, let me finish it though, because I got a question for you guys. If I had an orchestra, and it just so happens that they got caught in a very severe thunderstorm, who do you think is the most likely in the orchestra to get hit by lightning?
I don't have a guess on this one.
The conductor.
We should have seen that coming.
You know, it's even more fun. Like when you guys, I can baffle you with it and you can't come up with such an easy answer. Close it out.
Yeah, and I'll say growing up on job sites, there are not very many jokes that I haven't heard. I'm impressed.
They're all new to me.
Okay. If you are watching on YouTube today, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that little bell so that you get notified when we publish. If you are listening on one of your platforms, please go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. The reviews drive traffic. They help the algorithm help other people find us. And some of you are listening or watching, rather, on the newest platform that our content's available on, the Build Show Network.
Woohoo!
So Pete is new to the Build Show Network, but Steve and I have been creating content for the Build Show Network since 2019.
And that's buildshownetwork.com.
I
think
I'm here because
they
increased the age limit.
They
I
did
could get in. Yeah.
We've provided,
just under the wire, though. Who would have thought?
Listen, you're still in just double digits.
Yeah.
Look on the bright side.
Mm.
So
For a little while. Thank you for watching the podcast today. If you have questions and you would like to share them or send them in to us, rather, questions at the Unbuild It podcast. That's how you can reach us. Till next time, thanks for watching.
Hey, goodbye, y'all.
So long.